Welcome to the podcast where motherhood meets reinvention. I'm your host, Sharon Macey, and this is Mom to More. I'll be speaking with remarkable moms who have embraced the art of transformation, crafting their more by leveraging the skills they hone as stay-at-home moms. They'll share their experiences, struggles, and successes as they return to a former career, pursued a passion or hobby, or charted an entirely new path, giving you the clarity, motivation, and inspiration to help you answer the question, what do you want to do when your kids grow up? Welcome back, moms. Well, today we have a unique combo episode. Not only was my guest a stay-at-home mom, but she went on to reinvent herself in a way that will empower other stay-at-home moms with the necessary framework and tools to reinvent herself in her own unique way. Dr. Hilary Berger is deeply passionate about helping women thrive, offering a unique career counseling perspective tailored to the realities of a mother's life. She is the founder of Work Like a Mother, love that title, and the creator of an award-winning career counseling method integrating careers, motherhood, and mental health. She is a practicing psychotherapist, a holistic career therapist, and a licensed professional counselor. For over 25 years, she has counseled mothers to heal from their loss of self, rebuild their mission-driven professional purpose, relevance, competencies, and most importantly, their confidence throughout their parenting years and after children have left the nest. Hilary is a mother to 4 children who understands firsthand the daily challenge to parent as your heart and soul dictate, while also striving as a stay-at-home mom to access the courage and confidence needed to fulfill her own goals and dreams outside of parenting. It is possible, one day at a time. It is a blueprint for daily living unlike any I have seen before. So today is going to be chock full of information, so pull out your notepad and be prepared to listen and learn. Welcome, and I am beyond thrilled that you're here, Dr. Hilary Berger.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to talk with you and to your listeners. Very exciting.
Well, let's jump in because, boy, we have a lot to unpack today. I always start my interviews with my essential mom question, and that is, how many kids do you have and where did you raise them?
Well, I have 4 children. They are out of the house. Ages will be 30, and my youngest is 23. So 26, 28 will be 30.
You're covering the spectrum there.
Yeah.
So why was it, so you were a stay-at-home mom, right? Like all of us have been. And why was it important for you to be home with your kids? And approximately how many years did you have that stay-at-home mom role?
Yes, it never occurred to me not to be at home with my kids. What did not occur to me also was how I would ever thrive while I was at home with my kids. And to me, I felt that the formative years of children's development, that a mother was really important to that. And even though there's no one way to be raising children, there's no right way, there's no wrong way. For me, I knew that that I wanted and chose to be present, and to not be distracted the way that my work would typically distract me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a decision that I made early on, but without having any framework of how it would impact me and how it would affect the rest of my career. So,
all right. So, and I was there. My listeners have all been there. So, having been in that stay-at-home mom role and having given or dialed back or given up or whatever terminology we want to use about that, you discovered something really unique. And let's talk about the problem with no name and how you disappeared in plain sight. And I must admit, Hilary, that I do not know a stay-at-home mom who cannot relate to this.
Yes, which is why in the book, my story is actually the first chapter, because I felt that there's that this language of the problem that actually does have a name was a missing experience for me and for most women that I have come across around the impact of sort of swiping away what has shaped a lot of women up until they enter motherhood. Um, and so the problem with no name was referenced in The Feminine Mystique way back when by
Back in the
many,
day. Yeah.
right? And and it was deeply troubling for women, decades and decades ago. And so what occurred to me was that all these years later, with so much progress for women around working and having options professionally, that the psychological impact was the same, that we were still having a lack of language, a lack of naming the psychological issues that impact women when they make choices around, leaving the ways that they experience their identity. And so I felt it was very important to name this and look at this through the lens of women's realities and women's sacrifices, and also the notion that women come into parenting and into the role of motherhood very different than women in the 1950s and 60s. Many accomplished, educated, and really know themselves as very high functioning, intellectually, curious and accomplished.
It's so, so interesting. I'm going to read something from the workbook, which has been incredible. And I'm reading this because it really resonated with me. And it says, you said, what's happening is that you are trying to come to terms with the fact that while loving your children and choosing to raise them at home as generations of women in the past, you are keenly aware that this decision is taking a huge toll on every fiber of your being. You may find that you simply don't recognize yourself anymore. Yet, to the world, you look the same. You are supposed to feel fortunate to be able to stay home and not have to go to work, right? Yet, you may feel anything but fortunate because you cannot connect with who you once were. I could totally relate to that. And furthermore, your new world of moms is largely unaware of who you really are and what you did prior to having children.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Which then leads me into the question of what is Work Like a Mother, and why did you create it?
Yeah, thank you so much for extracting that concept from the workbook, because I think it summarizes the experience. It actually took me probably 20 years to create words to describe what you just read. There was so much ambiguity and cognitive dissonance and confusion and competing myths around women's lives and roles. And it just occurred to me that this experience that, millions of women, it was almost seeming like a rite of passage, that there would be no foresight, no positioning, no conversation, no warning, right? Even those who love us the most there was no way to name it because it wasn't named, right? And yet the subtle, insidious sensation in our bodies and our mind as we become foggy and less clear and less vital and less joyful, very subtly, right? We love raising our children. That goes without saying. We choose that. It's not questioning the validity of that. But the question is, why do women need to disappear really, in plain sight for the decades by which they are most healthy? Their brains are strong, their bodies are strong, their hopes and dreams for the future should be ever present. And yet there's this accepted idea that we should shut down that part of us in order to raise children. And so Work Like a Mother was really developed, as I look back, probably a little through my own experience.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you lived it. You lived it.
I lived it, no doubt. And I could say that to you sitting here today, almost 30 years in. But it wasn't until I started to really think about writing this in a organized way that I realized how much it did reflect my own experience. So for me, creating Work Like a Mother and a method by which women can have an attainable, realistic way to feel the essence of their pride, their need to feel their pride, their integrity, a way to break back in to the world of professional relevance, it didn't exist. And so that was what I embarked upon, was how do we create a way to validate the experience of a often educated, accomplished woman who couldn't put words to what was going on and instead became over focused on children, over focused on their bodies, over focused on other types of activities that didn't really fulfill their soul, but yet it was very commonplace and accepted. To have a way to name the experience of the loss of a professional self and identity, and then to create a pathway, a roadmap, a method, uh, redefining what career is for women and mothers, looking at it across a span of parenting stages, right? Actually across the lifespan. So to really redefine how girls and women imagine their lives, actually incorporating the role of motherhood into the very definition of a girl or woman's career development.
Which
So that,
I love that. It's so important because it says to me that yes, you can be that stay-at-home mom, but you can maintain that lifeline to yourself and you can
oh
stay
yes,
relevant.
what a gift, right? And that is why the book was written. It is to speak to every age, girl and woman, to name the nameless, right? And to provide a pathway that makes sense, that reflects the realities and the unique experiences of what women go through who are raising children, the demands, the physical demands, the exhaustion, the just the very real issues that whether you're parenting babies, toddlers, early, elementary school, middle school, high school, college students, right? We look at this across a spectrum, sort of a macro lens of our growth and vitality and relevance, so that we can always have access to our essence, our self, our curiosity, our confidence, our courage, right? Which when that goes away, and that's the first thing that happens, right? It's very subtle, but it happens. Then the rest of the parenting years are basically covering up for that and feeling very unsettled and destabilized and not knowing why, and then never imagining how you could ever catch up or go back or learn skills, or, it just seems so insurmountable. And so this method, Work Like a Mother, it's a counseling method. It is a solution-driven career development method for women. And it allows women to really understand that we can insert professionally relevant activities into our life from as early as when we have infants, through toddlers, through all the stages of parenting, understanding that we can be as professionally viable, relevant as our needs financially in our household, our needs of our children, or perhaps we're taking care of aging parents, right? It's looking at all of the roles that women typically are faced with, embracing and honoring that, right? We wouldn't toss out for 20 years our role as, a sister or a daughter or a friend, right? And why we find that we could toss out the role of our professional self
Mm.
for 20 or 30 years is just, it doesn't make sense, right? And
Yeah.
so we want to find a way to be holistic about our life, and just always having a way to be present so we can grow.
So let's jump in then so we can really give my listeners, a framework, an overview of, what this Work Like a Mother workbook is, because I found it eye-opening and incredibly valuable. So one of your chapters is entitled Rewriting the Script for a Mother's Career and Well-Being. So can you give
Yeah.
my listeners a big picture overview of what that entails?
So that chapter is really looking at redefining the concept of what is a career for a woman. And the way that I frame it is looking at career development as really a lifelong journey, right? Sort of weaving our professional role into our life according to the demands of our parenting. The asset that we are trying to hold on to is confidence. Our skills may feel somewhat obsolete, but it doesn't mean you are
Of
obsolete,
course
right?
not.
We have strategies to restructure our irrational beliefs that we are not
Mhm.
enough, that we have to be perfect. We are proud. We are used to, feeling a certain way, looking a certain way, perhaps, right? So it is really unimaginable to put ourselves into such a vulnerable place if we have lost access to that grit, that resilience, the
Mhm.
evidence that we can try something and work hard at it, even if it doesn't go so well the first time, right? So this model looks at, and in the book it's broken down into sections, right?
Mhm.
It's recognizing there's a self-awareness piece, right? The idea of career saliency, that if we line up 5 or 10 women, each of us have a different degree or a need for how much intellectual stimulation we actually need to feel well, right? Not everybody has the same need. And so it's important for us to understand what our own personal career saliency is,
Okay.
right? Because we may not be the same as our neighbor or the moms that we've met at school or in, a community organization, right? We may wonder, why do we not feel so well when other people seem to, right? And so it's getting in touch with that there is a need that each of us has, and to honor that,
Mhm.
right? And to realize that you might need more or maybe less, you know, um, intellectual or professional stimulation than other people, and that's okay.
And you know what was really interesting about this, especially that chapter for me, you ask a lot of questions of
Yes.
of the reader of the book, and there is a lot of introspection, and there's a lot of what I'll call standing naked in front of the mirror and going, okay, I don't know if I really want to circle that answer, but I'm feeling that. And I really love that you give a name to that, and it's okay to say, I become obsessed with X or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, because again, we're naming the truth, right? I think you're referring to sort of comparing, creating sort of a framework to label the difference
Mhm.
between the existence day to day of a mom versus the professional identity, right? And
Right.
what happens as a result, right?
Mhm.
Because high functioning people are high functioning people. And when our channel for exercising that, using our interests or skills or professional identity is not there, we have a different place for it. And sometimes they're not such healthy places, right? And
Understood.
so it also, and I say this not to judge women, I say this so it makes sense why we do this, right?
Mhm.
It's no wonder. I mean, I remember, with little children organizing my returns, my errands, right? I mean, I needed a focus and a purpose for the day with 4 children, little, right? And so to me, like having some sense of feeling accomplished, and that's just a little, maybe a silly example, but
No, but I
uh,
think that makes a lot of sense. And I'll follow up with the question of, with all these years home with your kids, what skills and superpowers do you think that you honed while you were home that help you create what you have created in Work Like a Mother?
you know, the obvious skills for mothers, which, are incredible organizers, therapists. I
Mhm.
mean, we are everything to our children, right?
Mhm.
We are extraordinary in our capacity to execute and multitask and make it look easy sometimes. So those skills are obvious to me, but to me, the superpower for me was getting in touch with the fact, you know, that I exist too, and that
Mhm.
I was doing no service to my family and my children to be so other-centered, right? Mothers, the main difference professionally versus motherhood is that motherhood is so other-centered. It is just focused on the well-being and the happiness and, fulfillment of other people, and very often at the expense of ourselves. Children don't do what they're told in words all the time, but the imprint of the feeling that they have when they watch their parents, their mother live
Mhm.
is much more powerful than words, right? You can't, if you say to your child, oh, it's okay, just try, and oh, if you don't succeed, it's okay, you'll try again. It's okay not to do well, just do your best. and then they watch you frozen for 20 years, right? And so that's a
Yeah.
real cognitive dissonance, and it's a big struggle for kids, right? They know that they know something's up. So to me, that was, and again, because there's no blueprint, there's no language
Mhm.
till now there is, right? But because this was never spoken, right? I think for me, the aha moment was when I started to deal with the pain that I was experiencing, feeling so shut down, even though I was very, very active. You wouldn't have known that about me. I
Right.
was running swim teams. I was busy with all aspects of community, children, I looked very happy. And that's why I wrote that chapter, because it will surprise people who know me. Um, and I think when I started to become vulnerable and be willing to go and take classes, the way I created Work Like a Mother was by signing up
Mhm.
for a 12-week class on developing a business plan, which I never studied business. And I actually had to take it twice. I quote unquote failed the first time because I was not able to do the financial analysis,
Mhm.
but I always showed up, and there was a part of me that was fighting for myself at that time.
Yeah. But
And
what a great
yeah,
lesson for your kids. You tried,
yes,
you failed. And
yes.
that is
And
such a
I was
strong
a
lesson for our
good
children.
student, right? I have a lot of degrees and I was very accomplished that way. But yes, trying and failing is okay, because you know what? That led to someone taking an interest in my business idea, which is
Mhm.
Work Like a Mother, right? This is decades ago. and giving me a chance. And I showed up the second time. I went for another 12 weeks, 3 hours a week, and I finished it and presented to a big group of people. And I was, you know, and it was my business plan. It was my blueprint, and it
Right.
still is. Yeah,
And congratulations for that. I think, woman to woman,
yeah,
trying something and failing. I think a lot of women are afraid to fail. They're afraid to put themselves out because, well, what if I don't, achieve X? And I think that's all within your head. You have got to be able to push past the uncomfortableness, just like you did. And you showed up and you were there and you did it. And that to me is a very strong example for other
yeah,
moms and also for your kids to see. It's like,
yeah,
wow, we saw mom and she was working her butt off, and look what she did.
yes.
Yay, mom.
That's right. And there is a way, and this method is designed so that you're always asking yourself, where do I belong today, right? When
Mhm.
you can always integrate your professional vitality into your day-to-day life. Work Like a Mother is a daily living model, inserting professionally relevant initiatives into the day based on the work of those hard questions you mentioned, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Creating that vision, that mission, that purpose, right? How we want to impact, getting in touch, sort of, pulling the veil
Yeah.
off of us and realizing that while we're raising children, we can be building our relevance every single day in some small way that reminds our body that it feels good to try, to
Yeah.
thrive, to be excited about something. And then the rest of it just becomes more of a practice and a less uncomfortable experience, right? So this method, people who take the classes or go through the book or work with me independently, right? That is the journey that they embark on. They just
Mhm.
come back
They
to
come
their
back to
best self.
life.
They come back to life. And what I always say is that our resources they feel so far away and untouchable, and they just don't feel like we could ever have them again. And yet, I could promise from working with thousands of women that our resources are right beneath the surface, and they just need a pathway back, right? It's the strong power of our protection
Mhm.
and defenses of protecting our pride that keep us from moving forward, right? It's that idea of having cement in our shoes, that immobilization,
Mhm.
that it's real, right? So when we can name it and talk about it and then do this introspective process to get in touch with that, yes, this is me, right? This is how I want to touch the world in my life, right? And we just change the rules of engagement so they don't look like career development or career searches or job searches. They do not look the same as the kinds of strategies that were really designed and created and are the norms, which were based on men's lives. It's just
Mm,
absolutely the opposite, right? So I think when we realize there's a way for us that makes sense, that feels good, that feels exciting, then we can sort of take a breath and realize that we actually can have it all. We can be the moms that we want to be in whatever way that is decided, and it doesn't need to be one decision, right? I look at this across parenting stages, right? And sort of having a macro lens on our relevance, our vitality, right? It's
mm,
not just one choice. It's building professionally relevant activities that begin and end. It's that SMART acronym that frees women to not have to make the right choice, to not have to put all their eggs in any one basket, to recognize that every day they have a chance to touch their vitality. If it's not something that's useful, they move on to the next initiative,
right.
right? If it's something that feeds their soul and it's good for their learning, they can stick with it, right? And that's the journey. It just is not about having to figure something out. How am I ever going to be hired again? None of that is useful, right? Because it's really just about building this from the inside out,
Hmm.
right? Letting our motherhood priorities be the foundation, and then inserting our professional relevance according to the demands of those years. And as we know, right, you have children that are
Hmm.
older, right? This changes. It doesn't look the same when they're in elementary school versus high school versus college.
Oh, 100%.
Um,
And I would just like to pause for a moment and say, this is music to my ears and wish I had known about this years ago, somehow managing to come out of it, if you wanted to say it that way, and create, my next act, my more. I wanted to jump in briefly to another chapter, which I thought was really interesting. I think it was chapter 10. And the first line of this chapter really hit me. And it says, many moms lose access to their authenticity while raising kids. So let's have a show of hands. I know we were just talking about that. And if you can briefly just state, or maybe restate, because I might have already said it, how do we regain our confidence? And also, what is that tree of life exercise?
yeah. Oh, the tree of life exercise is so powerful. Right. So that chapter is such an important piece of this framework. This is the how-to part of Work Like a Mother, right?
Mhm.
And I start with the assumption that when we can be in the right room, right, when we can start to feel the essence of our, joyfulness again, of our, vitality, right? I can't emphasize how good we are at covering up the loss of that, right? And so for me, the journey into a professional environment has to start with rebuilding an authentic life where you actually feel like you're here,
I'm
right?
here. Yeah.
Here, right? I exist. And so the tree of life and that whole section around lifestyle mapping, if you notice, there's two types of mapping,
Mhm.
um, templates in this workbook, right? One is about lifestyle and one is about professional mapping, right?
Mhm.
And I always begin with the lifestyle mapping, and the tree of life is the guide to the lifestyle map, right? And
Okay.
so it really asks you to look at the very, the every aspect of the way in which you are, living, right, your life, like what you care about
Mhm.
emotionally, mental health, right, self-care, right, how your connections. What happens is we disappear, right? And so suddenly we're not connected to old friends, right? Or colleagues. We don't feel that we are worthy of being connected to colleagues anymore, right? And so it's actually taking a look at the importance of connections and building authentic community where we feel we belong.
Mhm.
It's such a real negative belief that we adopt, which is that we don't belong. This is a very tactile, creative exercise
Mhm.
that allows the brain to sort of awaken and the circuits, in our mind to activate, and we use colored, markers, and we build a tree. And a lot of people I've worked with have it framed on their, on their wall in their
Mhm. So,
house.
you said something really interesting, which very much resonated with me, that it was important for your kids to know the real you. And I can appreciate that, especially for our daughters, because it shows them that even during the difficult times of motherhood, and boy, there are a lot, it is healthy to prioritize yourself and not lose sight of who you were before you had kids, and that you are worth it as a woman and a human being. And I thought, especially for our daughters, what an important message to say, you can be a mom and yet still be in touch with who you are, and then that can take you into your next act.
Yes, this is such an important point that you're raising, and I really appreciate you raising this because um, with all of the work focused for so many years on moms, right, on us, right, at all different stages, um, the message is equally as important for girls, right?
Mhm.
Because what girls need to know, we don't want another generation of girls who are blindsided when they become mothers. There is no reason for it, right? And it's such a gift to legitimize the role of motherhood as part of a girl or a woman's career journey, right? That, gee, you may choose to become a mom one day. And so while you're choosing your career path or your major in college, right, give some thought to having as many options and flexible choices as possible in your life. So have in mind that, having credentials really helps sometimes. Or if you're going into, marketing or finance or, careers that traditionally consume, all of your hours, and you work for organizations, right? Compared to like a therapist who has a shingle, right? So that
Mhm.
shingle can be used in many different ways. It's not so obvious for women in business or in engineering or
Mhm.
in many industries, right? So when we know and have the foresight, right, that when we position our lives and name it and label it, girls could then say, gee, you know what? Yeah, like I want to work as a banker or marketing, expert.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that when I decide to have kids, I have choices. And so I'm also going to get that certification in Excel or whatever it might be,
Mhm.
a, a
And that
way.
that is brilliant. I think that's brilliant. And I'll tell you, one of my daughters is actually already forward thinking enough to be doing things like that.
Well, you know what? How great. And you could name it for her to remind her why it's such a good idea,
Mhm.
right? There's no reason for there to be a silent rite of passage of girls to have to be faced with the choice of either keeping their finger in their careers by working full time or being with their children. There's just no reason for that for generations to come. And it's really incumbent upon our generation of women, right, who have lived through this,
Mhm.
to let it be the end, because women struggle any which way we approach this. So, because there was no way to position ourselves,
Right. It
right?
was either one or the other. It was, yeah.
One or the
Yeah.
other, and it's no judgment on a woman, right? We
Mhm.
all do the best we can.
And I know we're unfortunately coming to the end of our time together, but I do want to ask a question that I ask all of my moms, and that is, Dr. Hilary Berger, what is your more?
For me, I realize that there is a macro lens to be experienced about fulfilling goals, dreams, vitality while parenting, and
Mhm.
realizing the precious gift of being able to be a mother, to be with your children the way that you want and need, and also be absolutely relevant, curious, have a growth mindset where you're willing to learn, right? So I really believe that we can be our best selves and also parent without compromising.
Very well said. And there is so much information in this workbook. And as we wrap this up, I want to just say to you, this has been incredibly eye-opening, and I could talk to you all day on this, but I am so grateful for your time and sharing what this is so that women, can learn more about it. So as we wrap this up, Dr. Hilary, please tell my listeners where they can find you and where they can find this extraordinary workbook.
Yes, absolutely. So I am based in Weston, Connecticut. My office is in Westport. And I have a psychotherapy practice and where I work with women through the Work Like a Mother method and also through a therapeutic process and sort of blending women's health. And I also work remotely. So I work with people all over the country and in fact, all over the world. So I am easily accessible. And the workbook is available on Amazon and also barnesandnoble.com.
All of your contact information will be in the show notes where they can find the book. So it'll all be there for everybody to access.
And I always encourage women, moms out there, to feel free to reach out to me because I'm really interested in hearing from you and supporting you. So the book is an extension of me and the work, and also informed by, over 3,500 women who have gone through the Work Like a Mother method and are part of this community.
Well, Dr. Hilary, this has been so enlightening and eye-opening, and I just want to say thank you for your time today.
Oh, I am so privileged to talk with you, and good for you. I love what you're doing. So you're a perfect example of what it looks like.
I'd like to give a special shout out to Ellen, who was my very first podcast guest. And Ellen wrote, "It was an incredible experience being the first person interviewed for Mom to More. This podcast is for anyone who has reinvented themselves and any mom who feels that they can only have one identity. This is not the world we live in today, and everyone has so much to offer. Being a mom is great training for the rest of your life." Thank you, Sharon, for bringing this podcast to us all. Well, thank you, Ellen. Before I sign off, a quick favor. I would love it if you would take a few moments to follow or subscribe to the pod. Following us means you'll never miss an episode, and it really does help the show to grow. Just go to the Mom to More show page on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen in, tap the plus sign in the upper right corner, or click on follow. While you're there, if you'd be willing to leave a 5-star rating and review and share an episode with another mom, I'd be so grateful and appreciate your support. Thanks for listening in, and see you next time.